If you've ever asked yourself, should I save more cash? Should I pay into my pension? Should I pay off my mortgage? Should I pay off my debt first? Then this video is for you. Because one of the biggest mistakes people often make with money isn't necessarily choosing the wrong investment, it's doing things in the wrong order. You might be investing whilst carrying expensive debt. You might be overpaying your mortgage whilst missing out on free pension contributions. You might even be keeping too much money in cash and slowly letting inflation eat away at it. Or you might be putting too much into long-term investing before having a proper emergency fund. So in this video, I'm going to walk through what I think is the best order to invest your money in the UK. And to be clear, this isn't financial advice. Everyone's situation is different, but this is a simple framework that can help you make better decisions with your money. And because this is the risk perspective, we're not going to just ask what gives you the highest returns. We're going to ask what gives you the best returns for the risk you're willing to take. Because good money management is not just about getting rich, it's about building financial resilience. Okay, so before we get into the order, here's the key principle. Your money should usually go where it removes the biggest risk or gives you the highest guaranteed returns first. That sounds simple, but most people don't think of it that way. They just jump straight into investing. They ask, what's the best index fund? What stock should I buy? Should I invest in crypto? Should I put my money into property? But before you start choosing returns, it's key to first build the foundation, because investing is not just about making money. It's about making sure one bad month, one job loss, a car repair, or an unexpected bill doesn't financially derail you. So think of this as a ladder. You climb one step at a time. You don't necessarily need to complete each step perfectly before moving on to the next one, but the order matters. The first step is to pay off expensive debt. And by expensive debt, I mean things like credit cards, payday loans, store cards, overdrafts, high interest personal loans, and also buy now pay later balances if they're becoming unmanageable. This step comes before investing because paying off high interest debt gives you a guaranteed return. As an example, let's say you have a credit card charging 25% interest. If you pay that debt off, that's effectively like getting a guaranteed 25% return on your money. And there's not many investments that can reliably beat that. That's why for most people, investing while carrying expensive debt doesn't make sense, because you're trying to earn 6, 7, maybe 8% in the market over the long term while paying 10, 20, 30% interest in the background. It's like trying to fill a bucket while there's a hole in the bottom. So step one is simple. If you have expensive debt, focus on clearing it. There are a couple of different approaches you could take here. You could pay off the smaller debts first. That psychologically is beneficial. Or you could pay off the highest interest debt first, which mathematically makes more sense. This is more personal, and the best approach is one that you can stick to. Once the expensive debt is under control, the next step is to build a starter emergency fund. This doesn't have to be huge at first. Even £500 to £1,000 can make a big difference. The purpose of this money isn't to make you rich, it's to stop you from going backwards. Because life happens. The car needs repairing, your boiler breaks, your phone gets damaged, you might have an emergency trip, or your income might be delayed. Without an emergency fund, these things often end up on a credit card, and then you're back in debt. So before thinking about long-term investing, build a small cash buffer and keep it somewhere easy to access. A normal savings account is fine. And to be clear, this money shouldn't be invested in the stock market. If you need the money next week, you don't want it sitting in an investment that's 20% down. So step 2 is build a starter emergency fund. The next step is one of the most powerful and underrated wealth building tools in the UK. Get your full employer pension match. If your employer offers to match your pension contributions, you should usually try to contribute enough to get the maximum match, because that's essentially free money. Let's say you contribute 5% of your salary and your employer contributes another 5%. That means for every £1 you put in, your employer is also putting money in on your behalf. On top of that, pension contributions can also benefit from tax relief. So the return on this can be extremely difficult to beat elsewhere. A mistake people often make is they invest into a stocks and shares ISA while not contributing enough to get their full employer pension contribution match. Now, ISAs are great, and we'll come to these shortly. But if your employer is offering extra contributions for your pension and you're not taking them, you're effectively leaving money on the table. Of course, pensions have a downside. The money is locked away till later in life. So this isn't money for next year's holiday, a house deposit, or a short-term goal. But for long-term retirement saving, the employer match is usually one of the best deals available. So step 3 is contribute enough to your workplace pension to get the full employer match. Once you've cleared expensive debt, built a starter emergency fund, and captured your employer pension contribution match, the next step is to build a full emergency fund. For most people, this means around 3 to 6 months of essential expenses. And to be clear, not 3 to 6 months of your full lifestyle, it's essential expenses. Things like mortgage or rent, bills, food, insurance, childcare, transport, and minimum debt payments. The right number here depends on your situation. If you have a very stable job, dual income household, low expenses, no dependents, 3 months may be enough. On the flip side, if you're self-employed, on commission, in a less secure job, or have children, you may want closer to 6 months or even more. This is where personal finance becomes truly personal. The emergency fund isn't exciting, it's not going to go viral, nobody brags about their emergency fund, but it gives you options. It means you don't have to panic if something goes wrong. It means you can handle redundancy, a gap between jobs, or an unexpected bill without being forced into expensive debt. And from a risk perspective, this is huge, because the first goal of money isn't to maximize returns. The first goal is to avoid financial disaster. Now we get to actually investing. Once the foundations are in place, the next step for many is to use a stocks and shares ISA. In the UK, an ISA is powerful because your investments can grow free from UK income tax and personal gains tax. The annual ISA allowance is currently £20,000 a year. That doesn't mean you need to invest the full £20,000, and most people actually don't. But even investing £100, £200 or £500 a month into a stocks and shares ISA can build meaningful wealth over time. The key advantage of an ISA is its flexibility. Unlike a pension, you can access the money at any time. This makes it useful for medium to long-term goals. Things like building wealth before retirement, future house moves, financial independence, children's future support, or long-term investing outside of your pension. But there's one important point. A stocks and shares ISA should generally be for money that you won't need for the next 3 to 5 years. And that's because the market can fall. And if you invest money you need soon, you might be forced to sell at the wrong time. So if the goal is short term, cash may be more appropriate. If the goal is long term, a diversified investment fund within an ISA can make sense. For most beginners, this really doesn't need to be complicated. You don't need to do tons of research and pick individual stocks. A low cost global index fund can be a simple way to get diversified exposure to thousands of companies around the world. The important thing here is consistency. Not trying to time the market, not jumping in and out, not chasing whatever's trending online, just regularly investing in a diversified way over the long term. The next step depends on your goals. If you're under 40 and saving for your first home, or you're happy to lock money away until later in life, then a lifetime ISA might be worth considering. With a lifetime ISA, you can contribute up to £4,000 a year, and the government adds a 25% bonus. So if you put in £4,000, the government adds £1,000. That sounds excellent, and it can be, but there are some restrictions. You can usually only use it for buying your first time home, subject to the rules, or for later in life. If you withdraw for other reasons, you may face a penalty. So the lifetime ISA isn't as flexible as a normal ISA. This is why I wouldn't automatically say everyone should be using it, and it really depends on your goals. The lesson here is that tax benefits are useful, but only if the account fits your life. Don't let the tax wrapper drive the decision, let your goal drive the decision. Once your ISA strategy is in place, the next step is to consider increasing your pension contributions. This is especially relevant if you're a higher rate taxpayer, or close to losing child benefit, or earning over £100,000 where the personal allowance starts to taper away. In these situations, pensions can be very tax efficient. The obvious trade-off here being access. Money in a pension is locked away until later in life, so you need to balance tax efficiency with flexibility. That's why I like to think of ISAs and pensions together. An ISA gives flexibility, and a pension gives tax efficiency. For many people, the best approach isn't an ISA or pension, it's both. The pension helps fund later life, and the ISA gives you accessible wealth before then. The balance here really depends on your income, age, family situation, mortgage, job security, and your goals. But if you're already using your ISA, have a good emergency fund, and have spare income, then increasing pension contributions can be a very smart move, especially if your employer offers salary sacrifice, because that can reduce national insurance as well as income tax. Again, this isn't about blindly locking away as much money as possible. It's about making sure your money is working as efficiently as possible for the future. The next steps I'm going to touch on very briefly and the things that you should think about. One of them is overpaying your mortgage. Doing so gives you a guaranteed return equal to your mortgage interest rate. This decision's partly mathematical and partly emotional, so this decision needs to be reviewed personally. The next thing to think about is investing for children or wider family goals. Again, this varies massively and depends on personal circumstances, but there are tools such as junior ISAs, savings accounts, or simply investing in your stocks and shares ISA with the intention of helping your children or family later. Only after all of this would I start looking or thinking about other investments. Things like individual shares, buy-to-lets, crypto, business ventures, or alternative assets. These can all have a place for some people, but they come with higher risk, more complexity, or less diversification. And this is where people often get into trouble. They skip the boring foundations and jump straight into the exciting stuff. They don't have an emergency fund, they're not using their pensions properly, they're not using their ISA, and they still have expensive debt. But they're trying to pick the next big stock. This is all backwards. Speculative investing should only come after the basics have been covered, not before. If you want to allocate a small proportion of your portfolio to high-risk investments, that's your personal choice, but it should only be money that you can afford to lose. Not your emergency fund, not your house deposit, and not money you're borrowing at high interest. So, to recap, here's the order that I would use. Step 1, clear expensive debt. Step 2, build a starter emergency fund. Step 3, get your full employer pension match. Step 4, build a full emergency fund of around 3 to 6 months of essential expenses. Step 5, invest through a stocks and shares ISA. Step 6, consider a lifetime ISA if it fits your goals. Step 7, increase your pension contributions. Step 8, consider mortgage overpayments and investing for children or family goals. Step 9, only then consider higher risk investments. Now, this order won't be perfect for everyone. Some will need to adapt it. For example, if you're self-employed, your pension situation might be different. If you're saving for a house, your cash savings might take priority. But as a general framework, this order helps you avoid the biggest mistakes. It protects you first, then it captures free income, then it builds flexibility, then it builds long-term wealth, then and only then does it consider high-risk investments. This is the right way around. The main message I want you to take from this video is building wealth isn't about doing one clever thing, it's about doing the right thing in the right order over a long period of time. Most people don't need a complex strategy, they need a clear sequence. Clear bad debt, build cash resilience, take the free pension money, use tax efficient accounts, invest consistently and avoid unnecessary risk. Because money isn't just about returns, it's about options, it's about resilience. It's about being able to handle life without constantly feeling under pressure. And that's the real goal. If you found this useful, please like the video and subscribe to The Risk Perspective and let me know, where are you on this ladder right now? I'll see you in the next one.